It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
The long arm of Vladimir Putin reaches parts that others cannot possibly fathom. After completely ignoring the arsongate story for 2 whole weeks, the mass media in Britain today is filled with front-page splashes. The MI5 are probing whether arsongate wasn't in fact a Russian intelligence operation. You really couldn't make it up, but these fellows are determined to do so. And the kamikaze attack by Israel on Iran is still, they say, on the agenda, though whether Netanyahu will survive long enough to pull the trigger must be increasingly problematic. The West has tired with him, and its mouthpieces in all the posh papers are already proclaiming it's time for him to go. Even Bono called for Israel to be free of Netanyahu. That's, I suppose, the new yardstick. And we'll be looking at the Ukraine war, where just this afternoon, I think, President Putin survived an assassination attempt. A Ukrainian drone fired on his helicopter in the region of Kursk. If it had succeeded, the world would have become uncontrollable. It's pretty much spinning out of control as it is. But there were fireworks in western Ukraine last night, as the night before there were over Moscow. So it seems a green light somewhere has been given for the war to drag on. It's all coming up here on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
So the British intelligence services have let it be known to selected publications that the iron fist, the long arm of President Vladimir Putin did reach the back door of the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. MI5 probes Putin link to starmer arson blitz. I have to laugh because I have to really watch that I actually spell arson properly in my many tweets on the subject. So we're asked to believe, well, first of all, as a matter of process, the mass media in Britain completely ignored this story. They played it down to a minor paragraph on the inside pages. And indeed, some of them told me that my hype over the matter was risking prejudicing a fair trial for the three accused. Well, look at that front page. As a matter of process, I don't see how this trial can now proceed. How can these three Ukrainian male models, massage artists, and aspiring actors possibly get a fair trial before a jury in Britain when the British intelligence services have just told the whole country that it was a Russian sabotage operation? Secondly, still on process, if it was a Russian state operation, then it was terrorism. Not arson with a risk to life, it was terrorism. In which case, why haven't they been charged with terrorism? If they are alleged terrorists, then the matter should be dealt with at the appropriate level of the law. But maybe this is all just an afterthought. In the aftermath of not one single member of Parliament on Wednesday at Prime Minister's Questions having the guts to ask the obvious question, which I can tell you as someone who was in the British Parliament from the 1980s until last year, at any other time this question would have been asked. Some renegade MP, a Tory maybe, would have been told by the whips to just stand up and all innocent like, Uriah Heep like, ask the Prime Minister if he had ever met or had any contact with any or all of the three Ukrainian male model massage artists who were accused of arsoning around in his properties, two of them, and a motor car that he previously asked. Inexplicably, not one single member of Parliament raised that question. If it had been raised, this matter could have been, if you'll forgive the pun, put to bed. The Prime Minister could have said, I have no intention of prejudicing this trial, but I confirm that I have never met and never had any contact with any of these three people accused of the arson attacks on my former properties. Well, in one case, still properties, lived in by his sister-in-law, but still his property. Now, the question I asked right at the beginning, how did three Ukrainian male models, massage artists and aspiring actors, £20 an hour, with the first hour for free, how did they know the former addresses and the registration number of the former motor vehicle of the British Prime Minister? This is a quite extraordinary thing. As I said on Wednesday in our record show, 2.5 million views so far. If this Sunday show keeps up, it will be the very first ever 5 million audience mother of all talk shows. But as I said on Wednesday, if the members of Parliament won't rise to the occasion and ask the obvious question, to which he could have answered, no, I have never heard of them, never met them, then we would at least know, because the Prime Minister wouldn't lie, would he? Then we'd at least know that we were dealing with a probable foreign-inspired, executed terrorist attack on the British Prime Minister, which would be an attack on the United Kingdom itself, and therefore very much more serious, deserving of the most serious charges. But nobody asked, and answer, therefore, he gave none. But looking at the allegation that is being made on the front pages of the British newspapers today, let's just say, if this is true, then John le Carré himself could not have written it. Russia, which we're told is a homophobic republic, recruited 3 male models, massage artists, and aspiring actors who are Ukrainian citizens. In one case, dual citizen of both Romania and Ukraine. And that those 3 male models allegedly attacked Starmer's property precisely to get this kind of story running and running. If it was Putin, it's a spectacularly successful act of espionage. It's a fantastically successful use of, for money or ideology, who knows, Ukrainian citizens to allegedly commit an attack which is going to dominate the summer in Britain. Because this case goes to court in June. And when it goes to court, the accused will have to say something. And what are they going to say? That Vladimir Putin made me do it? The dog ate my homework? Vladimir Putin gave me however many rubles to do it? And though patriotic Ukrainian citizens, we decided to go along with it? Or are they going to say something else? Something deeply more personal? And if they do, then Keir Starmer's balls are on the slate. He will not survive the rest of this year as Prime Minister. That's my confident prediction. If it was the Russians, what done it? It was dazzlingly successful as a maneuver, and makes you wonder why a shrink-wrapped bottle of Novichok perfume has not yet been found in a charity bin nearby. My own views on this will be obvious. I think if you believe the Russians done this, then I've got a bridge in London I could sell you going cheap, cheap, cheap. I believe that it's much more likely to be another foreign actor, if terrorist attack it was, and much more likely, even more still, to be connected to some personal business. But I'm unable to stand any of that up. I'm anxiously waiting the trial or the first appearance in court in June, as you are. But the fact that Putin is on the British mind to the incredible extent that the Prime Minister appears to go to bed at night dreaming of Vladimir Putin is a measure not of strength but of weakness, a measure of desperation. It's quite clear from the barrage that multiple Ukrainian cities faced last night, from a bewildering array of armaments, that air defense no longer exists in Ukraine, despite the scores of billions of pounds, dollars, and euros that have been spent on the aforementioned air defense. The Russians are able to strike Ukraine at will. The fact that they don't want to cause massive damage to civilian areas, still less to civilian people, is obvious. If it wasn't the case, then Kiev would have looked like Gaza right from the very beginning of this conflict. But I don't think the patience of the Russians can be guaranteed. And when I saw that an attempt to assassinate President Putin had been made this afternoon, I thought it's going to be a terrible night tonight in Ukraine. And there is nothing and nobody going to stop it. Not Keir Starmer, his mind's on other things. Not Emmanuel Macron, he's all mouth and no trousers. He and the German Prime Minister, the Chancellor of Germany, have no arms left. Don't believe me, they have said so. They have told the world and Ukraine that they can spare no more weapons for Ukraine without leaving their own armory dangerously denuded. So nobody's going to stop what Russia does next. And what Russia says it's going to do next is draconian indeed. The day will come, if it hasn't already, that they will beg for the terms that the Russians initialed in the Istanbul agreement just a month or 2 months after the beginning of this phase of the conflict. Now, Russia's not going to just take all of the oblasts that it currently holds and who've held referenda and voted to return to Mother Russia, but is going to, on the back of the failed Kursk insurrection, the Kursk attack, the invasion and the temporary occupation of the Russian area of Kursk, they have decided that they intend to make a buffer zone right around the state of Ukraine, all of the east and south of it in any case. And so places like Odessa, places like Kharkov are going to be Russian occupied territory. They may not be absorbed into the Russian Federation, but they will be Russian occupied territory with the status of buffer zone so that they cannot ever again be used to infiltrate into the territory of Russia. So the outcome of this war is getting worse and worse and worse for what remains of Ukraine. And therefore, somebody somewhere has to tell Zelensky that it's time for him to go. And that somebody is quite likely very close to him right at this minute. That somebody is likely to be one of his own inner circle, one of his own military top brass, who are bound to be saying, the only way is down. The only way is more and more territory lost. The only way is more landlocking, so that we will have no access to the Black Sea at all. And that means that what's left of Ukraine will be little more than a Kosovo, UN Western occupied satrapy with no meaningful independent life of any kind, and used only as a knife in the side of an adversary. In the case of Kosovo, the adversary being Serbia, which is the rightful owner of that property, and in this case, a knife in the side of the Russian Federation, but not much of a knife at that. So, is the war coming to an end in the Ukraine? I believe so. I believe that it definitely will have ended by the end of this year. I believe that the course of the war has proved so disastrous that the European allies, as well as long ago now, the American ally, have decided to abandon ship. And abandoning ship means abandoning Zelensky. Donald Trump, in his famous 2-hour phone call with President Putin, is quite likely to have given a green light to all of this. It's hard to believe that the 2-hour phone call did not touch upon what Russia intends to do next. And we now know what it is they intend to do next. Now, are the Americans evacuating the battlefield in Ukraine only to engage in one elsewhere? Is a subject to which I now turn. I'm going to be bold and tell you that if Israel attacks the nuclear power plants of Iran, Iran will put an end to the existence of the state of Israel. They don't have nuclear weapons, but they have ballistic superpower that the air defenses of Israel simply cannot cope with. Already, 20% of the people of Israel have left the country. And these are the most portable of Israeli citizens, with skill sets and with capital and with know-how that are easily sellable elsewhere in the Western world on the employment market. The employment situation inside Israel is as bad as the economic situation, which is now a basket case. Tourism is zero. Hardly anyone wants to go for a holiday to a war zone. And they are now desperately hoping for a change of heart in Washington, hoping not for more missiles, but for more money, because they simply cannot afford to continue this level of conflict for this long when they haven't even managed to subjugate the tiny Gaza Strip. The idea of them flying thousands of kilometers to launch an attack, which would be hotly contested on the day, on the nuclear industry of Iran, a perfectly legal nuclear industry, one that was operating perfectly legally according to the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which polices these matters, during the period of the former nuclear deal with the big powers. There was nothing wrong with what Iran was doing with its nuclear power plants. Therefore, the idea that they should now stop enriching uranium when they are perfectly legally entitled to enrich uranium, and the idea that they're going to sit back and do nothing if Israel attacks those perfectly legal nuclear power installations is for the birds. The truth is, Iran will obliterate Israel if it launches this attack. Which begs the obvious question. Is this all a bluff from Netanyahu? Or does he know that the United States would enter a full-scale war with Iran on Israel's behalf? I personally believe all the signs are that America would not do so. Not just because it would be extremely costly militarily to American forces in the region. 50,000 American soldiers are sitting there out in various fields of the Persian Gulf region, and they would all be within easy shooting distance, like shooting fish in a barrel, of the Iranian response. Not only because the Straits of Hormuz would instantly close, causing an economic crisis everywhere in the world, but in particular in the Western European part of the world. Not only because if the Straits of Hormuz were blocked and economic activity was reduced to zero, and the price of petrol, of gas at your filling station would make your eyes water just before you had to turn away because you couldn't afford to buy any, but because the closest allies of the United States would all be left a smoking ruin. That is, the allies that Donald Trump left just a week or so ago, literally dripping with gold and diamonds and pearls and elephants and dancing girls. Who knows what else? If all these countries' economies are completely destroyed in the fighting, as I predict they instantly would be, if the property market of Dubai vanishes overnight into a smoking hellhole, then I don't think that American influence in the Arab world, in the Gulf region, would survive any longer than the smoking ruins. So I don't believe myself that Donald Trump will enter a war for Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Therefore, I don't believe that Israel will do so either. Which means it's all a bluff to assist America in the nuclear talks. Now, we'll hear from the Oracle, Professor Seyed Marandi, in just a few minutes on where those negotiations stand. It seems to me more likely that a deal will be reached, and that deal will at least calm the danger of World War III in the Persian Gulf. And if the danger of World War III is calming in the Ukraine, as I believe that it is, then that's two big reasons to be cheerful. Lastly, the situation in Gaza continues to become a Holocaust on your telephone. Imagine if you had been able to watch on your telephone, more or less live, the pictures from Auschwitz, from Treblinka, from Birkenau, from the death camps, the extermination camps, erected by the Nazis and their allies in Poland and in Western Ukraine and elsewhere. Imagine if you had been able to watch the children going in to the gas chambers. Well, you are able to watch its modern equivalent, and hundreds of millions are doing so daily. I can tell from my own social media that hundreds of millions are watching daily scenes that would not have been worsened in the death camps of Auschwitz, Treblinka, and the others in the Holocaust in the Second World War. This is Babi Yar on television. we can see the people in the pits being mass murdered, children maimed, mutilated, beheaded, women, pregnant women. I just watched a fetus that was found outside its mother on the ground next to her dead body. This is a horror show beyond any comparison with anything that we have been able to watch before. This is Genghis Khan and the Mongol hordes on steroids, slaughtering at will the most vulnerable, the most innocent people. And it's supported by the great majority of Israeli citizens. Well over 80% of Israeli citizens support the total extermination or permanent ethnic cleansing from their own land on the Gaza Strip. And I haven't seen a poll, but I'd be surprised if there were not similar numbers for doing the same next in the West Bank. And this is leading to a great many consequences, implications. It's reverberating throughout society, everywhere. More and more desperate efforts are having to be made by the Hasbara and by the clique of pro-Israel supporters that have so much influence in the political class and in the media class in Western countries. People are being struck down off Twitter. They're being cancelled from stage, or they're being charged with terror offences for holding up a flag on a stage. Talk about crushing a butterfly on a wheel. We'll be discussing all of this over the course of the next 1 hour and 35 minutes. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
News coming in thick and fast, and the votes on our poll this evening even thicker and even faster. Who should face terror charges, Kneecap or Keir Starmer? And my goodness, it doesn't look good for the British Prime Minister. Almost 30,000 people have voted in this poll, and I'm only now just reading it out. Who should face terror charges, Kneecap or Keir Starmer? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, please make sure you subscribe to my channel and give a big thumbs up to the show. It helps us in our ceaseless struggle with Mr. Algorithm. Although it's a struggle we are definitely now winning. I told you that Wednesday's show, now bear in mind Wednesdays are normally slightly smaller audiences than Sundays. 2.5 million people watched Wednesday's show, all or in part. If we get the same tonight from tonight's show, it will be the very first ever 5 million audience Mother of All Talk Shows. So a big thanks to our entire audience on that. So get voting. Who should face terror charges, Kneecap or Keir Starmer? And if you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free in Britain and Ireland, 08081 965522. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Now, Professor Seyed Marandi from the University of Tehran is the doyen of commentators on all matters Iranian and indeed much further afield increasingly. They're lucky to have him. We are even luckier to have him as a regular guest on our show. Professor, wonderful to see you again. You may have heard, perhaps not, I struck a slightly optimistic note in my analysis of where we are now on the American-Iranian talks. Are you optimistic?
I think I should be cautious, although your logic is, I think, very strong. But the problem, of course, is that the United States is not the political order in the United States is not the most logical or reasonable, and the Israeli regime is a genocidal regime. So it's really hard to say. It is a positive sign that the United States backed down, at least in private, in order to get the Iranians to come to the negotiating table again. We had the 5th round of talks, and the Iranians, although they went in late a bit, I think, to send a message to the Americans, but the fact that they did participate was because the United States sent a message through the Omani government, basically saying that their public stance is different from their private stance. But I think the most important issue is what you alluded to, and that is that Iran is a missile and drone superpower. And I think the Russians will attest to that. If there is a strike against Iran by the Israeli regime, Iran will launch a major strike, which will be far, far more effective than what was called True Promise 2. In fact, Iran owes the Israeli regime a True Promise 3, and this would, I think, give an excuse for the Iranians to go much further than what they were thinking of doing for True Promise 3. So it would be a foolish move by the Israeli regime. They will not be able to do it without the Americans. Last time when the regime attacked Iran, and it wasn't a very effective attack, but they used the United States supported them by using their bases in Turkey, in Qatar, in the Emirates, in Bahrain, their radar installations. They helped Israeli jets to refuel. Without the United States, it's impossible for the regime to carry out any sort of effective strike. Of course, this also shows how sadly countries in our region are complicit in what the United States, what the Israelis have done in the past. Whenever the Iranians struck the Israeli regime, these same radar installations in Turkey and in the Persian Gulf region were used to help Israel, the Israeli regime. And I assume that the same will happen in future.
And if it does, of course, Iran has made clear that anywhere from which this attack originates or is facilitated will be regarded as legitimate targets for Iranian countermeasures.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. The Persian Gulf region is full of American bases. And these are all glass castles and glass mansions that can be destroyed very easily. I would imagine that if the Americans were to actually strike Iran at some point, they would have to do it from Diego Garcia. And that would be a 5,000-kilometer flight. And they would have to fly over Iran. And I would guess that these planes, some of them will be shot down. And of course, the Iranian counterstrike will be massive. Wherever there are American bases, they would be seen as legitimate targets or American interests that are not in bases. But if attacks are carried out from Qatar, from the Emirates, or anywhere else in the region, those countries will be seen as hostile, the entire country. So I find it very unlikely that they will allow those bases to be used directly. But one important point is that if the Israeli regime attacks, I think that the Iranian counterstrike would be decisive. And the Iranians, over the past few months, have been preparing themselves for an American or an attack by the United States or by the Israeli regime. They've been improving their air defenses massively, and they've been preparing their missile and drone capabilities for greater precision and greater accuracy. I think it will be devastating for the Israeli regime if they carry out an attack. So I agree with your logic. I was listening to you before I came on. I think you're absolutely correct. The only thing that stands in the way of your logic is the fact that the Americans, the empire, the Israeli regime have nothing to do with logic usually.
Now, I made the point, I'm sure you're aware of it, even from Tehran, but here in the West, it's patently obvious from statements being made in Canada, in the United Kingdom, elsewhere on the mainland of Europe, by politicians and by publications and broadcasters that have clung ferociously, even Piers Morgan clung ferociously to being shills for Netanyahu's slaughter of the innocents, of the firstborn or even unborn. They have now done a 180 and are now, in some cases, Bono, for example, who hasn't said one cheep in the whole of this affair, are calling for Netanyahu to go, for Israel to be freed from Netanyahu's grip. And in Piers Morgan's case, he has, in his own words, turned on the Israeli government and acknowledged that in all those shouting matches he had with thee and me, he was wrong. Now, there's greater rejoicing, as you know, in heaven when a sinner doth repent than the 99% who hath no need of repentance. So on one level, we should congratulate each other on the role we've played in bringing about this change of heart. But what do you think really lies behind it? And what does it portend for Netanyahu?
I'm not sure how long this change of heart will last. We'll see about that. But I think the reason for all this change is not because any of these people have suddenly discovered religion or they've seen the light. It's because that the public has turned against the Israeli regime. People are waking up, despite the fact that they are shutting down Instagram accounts, as I think your next guest will explain, not just because they're shutting down Facebook accounts. I mean, they are shutting down Facebook accounts, Instagram accounts, and they are, in my case, I'm sure, on Twitter, they are massively trying to suppress voices that support the Palestinian people. But despite all that, people are much more awake than before. I am in Venezuela right now, and there's for the local elections, and there's a host of young people here from different parts of the world who are monitoring the elections. They're observing the elections. And when you speak to these young people, George, from all over the world, it's so encouraging. It's like when I speak with them, I have nothing to add. They know much more than me. They're so eloquent in the way in which they speak. The world has changed. There's such an awakening, and so many young, sophisticated speakers and thinkers are now active that the establishment has to make some sort of change. But even if Netanyahu is removed, nothing really changes in Palestine. They want to escape. They want to prepare the ground so that when Netanyahu is ultimately removed, they can say all is well now. It's like saying Nazi Germany without Adolf Hitler is fine, or that ISIS without Abu Baghdadi is normal. or Al-Qaeda without Jolani is a normal and regular and legitimate organization. With or without Netanyahu, the Israeli regime is a genocidal regime. And the polls that you were referring to show that very clearly. It is not, the liberals in the Israeli regime are very different from the radical religious Zionists. But when it comes to seeing the Palestinian people as subhuman, when it comes to seeing them as Amalek, the majority of these people as well view the Palestinians just like their adversaries within the broader Zionist society in Palestine.
Now, Professor, I alluded earlier to the breadth of your analytical purview, which has spread now far beyond the Persian Gulf issues. So let me turn you, if I may, to what's happening in Ukraine. It's still a very high stakes business. President Putin might well have been assassinated today in a helicopter, as it happens. A drone attacked his helicopter. It was shot down, but imagine, God forbid, if it had not been shot down and the president of Russia was now no longer with us. The blizzard attack on all parts, actually, of Western Ukraine last evening followed in retaliation to a blizzard of drone attacks on Russian territory from Ukraine. It's still very, very dangerous. But it does look pretty much to me like Donald Trump has made a decision that this is not his war and that this war needs to be blamed on whomsoever it was that was operating the auto pen in the last couple of years of Joe Biden's presidency. Does it look that way to you?
Yes, I think you're absolutely correct, although you're much more of an expert than I. It was very clear from day one when the war started that NATO would lose. And despite all the propaganda, it was obvious that that Ukraine was going to be sacrificed and destroyed. And they pretended that the Russians were weak and the Russians were vulnerable, and they were taking apart washing machines to use the chips to make missiles. Well, we saw what happened last night, and how many drones and missiles are being used against Ukraine. And it's clear that the propaganda machine from day one was churning out nonsense. But in doing so, they've caused the slaughter of 1 million men in Ukraine for nothing. Nothing except for the fact that these wealthy elites in the United States directly or indirectly receive their wealth from the military-industrial complex. It's just like Afghanistan. Nothing has changed. You know better than I that Carter and Brzezinski, they cooked the plan to help these so-called mujahideen so that the Soviets would invade Afghanistan. People often think that the Soviet Union invaded and then the Americans got involved, but it's the exact opposite. The Americans started helping these extremists in order for the Soviet Union to invade so that they would have their Vietnam. In other words, they sacrificed the people of Afghanistan, and while doing that, they helped spread Wahhabism and Salafism and the terror that has destroyed so much of the region, whether in Syria, whether in Libya, whether in Afghanistan or Iraq or elsewhere. So the behavior of the US empire, the absence of morality among US elites and elites across NATO, it's the same as it was back then, and nothing is going to change in future. The only hope is that the empire will soon suffer such a defeat because it has overextended itself. It is at war with the war, whether trade wars or whether military wars or whether confrontations with Iran, for example, over the nuclear program, it has overextended itself. And I think with the horrible economic situation that we see in the United States and elsewhere may hopefully bring about a collapse of the empire and may force a change in mentality among American and Western elites. The only danger is that, as they say, drowning people grab at anything nearby. They may choose a most dangerous path, and that is to lash out as they drown. But I'm optimistic about the future, and I think that by overextending itself, the empire will ultimately bring about its own demise and a better world for the rest of us.
Amen. Professor Seyed Marandi, stay safe and be happy in Venezuela. Thank you again for joining us. Now, our poll is looking like a record poll, certainly in recent months. 31,000 people have now voted. Who should face terror charges? Should it be the Irish band Kneecap, or should it be Keir Starmer, whose government issued the demand for prosecution? You can vote on Telegram, on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on X, my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Let me take a quick break, and then we'll go to Vermont, where Raphael wants to talk about Iran and the US war, and your calls in general. Stay tuned.
As the green smoke rose, their faces flashed out, pallid green, and faded again as it vanished. Then slowly the hissing passed into a humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Suddenly, a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out after it. Forthwith, flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man were suddenly and momentarily turned to fire.
You get that reading, you get my films, The Killings of Tony Blair, Killing Kelly, and so on. You get a regular chat with me on the chat function, and you get all kinds of new material that's in the pipeline first or even exclusively. So I need you to help me. The Patreon page, patreon.com/George Galloway, plays a crucial role in keeping this show alive. A show which on Wednesday alone got 2.5 million viewers. It's vital that we keep 2 shows a week. We can only do so with your support. So if you're not supporting us through MOATS.tv on the website, please think about supporting us on patreon.com/George Galloway. Raphael is in Vermont, as I said, wants to talk about Iran-US war. Go ahead, Raph.
Hey, Georgie, thank you for taking me. Georgie, I have 2 things I want to say. About Iran, I want to make it clear. United States, there will not be no war with Iran, because I do believe, I don't have any connection, but that's my perception. I do believe those conversations Trump had with Putin made it clear to Trump, if you touch Iran, you touch us. And I believe China also make it clear to Trump, Iran is untouchable. And if you do anything to Iran, you're going to have to do with us. And it's not because the United States is wise. It's not because Trump doesn't hate war, anything like that. It's just because they told Trump clearly what going to be the consequences. And the second thing I want to say, Georgie, I want to make that point. Zelensky made two big mistakes. Attacking Moscow while she was there. And then he doubled down, putting life in jeopardy and by attacking the helicopter. Georgie, I did some research and I found out this is how Zelensky will end. Georgie, you know that guy named Pugachev? Catherine the Great put that dude in a cage and brought him and paraded him around with Moscow. Zelensky will go back to Moscow in a cage. Now, the only difference is the end will be different. They're not going to quarter him like Catherine did to him. It's not going to that. They're going to put this man in some kind of jail in Siberia. My word. And I would like to know if you agree or disagree with me. Thank you.
Well, I hope it doesn't come to that, and I'd be against the parading of conquered foes in that way, and of course completely opposed to quartering people. But I do think he'll come to a sticky end, but I don't think it will be at the hands of the Russians. And now, on the issue of the Iran nuclear question that you started out with, I think you're absolutely correct. If you attack Iran, you are attacking Russia. If you attack Iran, you are attacking China. Both have the railway, for example, which cuts in half the travel time from China to its market in terms of the oil supply from Iran to China. The transit time will now be half what it was by sea. The final miles, kilometers of the railroad were completed today. China has vital economic interests in Iran, and so does Russia. So it would be exceedingly foolish of President Trump to take on all three of these adversaries. For what? For an Iran nuclear deal, which can be portrayed and packaged as an improvement on the Obama Iran nuclear deal. Trump can say, look, I forced them to dot this I and cross this T. I forced them to allow more monitors, more inspectors, whatever the final outcome is. And he can declare a victory. So you can do that, or you can go to war with a very dangerous adversary with even more dangerous friends. So I'm with you, Raphael, in Vermont on that question. Thanks for being the first caller. You can send comments, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, on the QR code, which is on the screen right now. And if I get a chance, I'll read them out, like this one. Retired rebel. We were at the Walk with Israel march today. The Zionists hired Filipinos to bolster their numbers. Vile, baseless crowd nonetheless. And Eric Suarez sends $10 to the show. Thank you, Eric, for that. Don't believe the repentant. They are washing off the blood off their hands before the final solution. So in the future, they can claim they were on the side of Palestine all along. I think people's memories are very much longer than they used to be, not least because we've got the receipts on our telephones. V8 says Iran better watch out on that deal. Israel never respects deals or contracts. Don't get fooled, Iran. Israel is dishonest. And S. Downs says the Iran regime is one of the few in the world with common sense and with a moral compass. May God protect them. And Zenial says Mossad is planning something. They have multiple front companies in many Western countries, as well as embedded assets within government. Pieces on the board are being moved quietly. Don't get psyoped. Now look, a big thanks to those who've already been on MOATS.tv and left their donations this week. Richard Rogers, Mark Peter Edwards, Jan Fox, Maureen Lindsay, and a big thank you to Barbara Howard, who've been extremely generous. Please do become a MOATS donor tonight. Give what you can to support the show. even if it's just $1, a pound, or €1. Our new and improved donation feature on the website, moats.tv, makes it easier than it has ever been. John is in New York. Let's hear from him. John, welcome.
It's John. I'm from New York, and I am a proud student in the university, paying tuition monthly on Patreon. My question...
Thank you, John.
My question deals with South Africa and the spectacle, and I'll call it a spectacle, of Trump's meeting with the president of South Africa. I was disgusted by my president's actions, but more importantly, I can't seem to get accurate information in my country about the authenticity of this video proving, quote unquote, genocide. And I was wondering, I myself am ignorant of matters in South Africa since Mandela, I guess since 94, 95. So I'm somewhat ignorant in that respect, but I have no confidence in the authenticity of such a video that was shown at that meeting. And I just wanted you to comment on that.
Well, thanks, John. If you mean the video of the song, I'll come to that in just a minute. But Donald Trump made a complete fool of himself, or rather his staff made a complete fool of him, because they supplied him with material to display to the world's cameras, and not least the 1 billion people in Africa, a series of literal hoaxes. He showed a memorial which was composed of crosses, claiming these were the graves of white farmers. In fact, they were not graves. They were a memorial to all farmers, black and white, who have been killed over the period since the end of the Liberation War by all parties. That is to say, black farmers that have been killed by white farmers that have been killed by black farmers or other black people. Quite often their staff, their laborers, people that they ruled the roost over many years. It was a complete fiasco. Secondly, he held up pictures of a disaster area, of bodies destroyed, dead, and mutilated, which was not even from South Africa, let alone a depiction of anything remotely involving the deaths of white farmers. It was a scene from the Congo, from a disaster at a mine in the Congo, a completely different country, 1,000 kilometers or more away. Nothing to do with President Ramaphosa, nothing to do with the ANC, nothing to do with any of the political elements in South Africa. Thirdly, they showed a song being sung by someone who is President Ramaphosa's biggest enemy. He is the enemy of the ANC government in South Africa. It would be like holding against Donald Trump a song sung by an inveterate opponent of his in the United States. I don't know, a member of Black Lives Matter or a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Why is Trump responsible for that song? And why was Ramaphosa responsible for the song sung by Malema, the commander-in-chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters? Now, what is that song? I find it a very deeply disturbing and unpleasant song. But you have to see it in context, as the South African courts have already done. Somebody took a legal case against the singing of that song, and the South African courts enshrined it in the legacy books of the South African freedom struggle. When they were singing "Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer," this was in the middle of a liberation war in which the Boer and the farmer was in the front line. Now, I believe that that song should have been retired at the victory. It should have been kept in the memory hole of something that was understandable in the middle of a bloody war in which the South African people were having to wade through their own blood to liberate themselves, to give themselves the right to vote, to give themselves the right to live wherever they wanted to live, to love anybody they wanted to love, because that was the nature, the reality of South African apartheid. I know, as many of you know, quite a bit about it. I was there, undercover, during apartheid, on behalf of the ANC, running errands for them and playing, therefore, a very, very small part in the great freedom struggle, of which I'm extremely proud. So I don't like the song. I wish that Malema would not sing it. I'm not a supporter of Malema. I'm not a supporter of the ANC any longer. I think that President Ramaphosa could have handled the Oval Office confrontation better. He did it with dignity. He came out ahead. But I would have given him a couple of zingers to respond with that would have been memorable. I would have had him say, did you show pictures and videos of the genocide in Gaza when Netanyahu was sitting in this chair? No. Why are you picking on me? And I would have said, you're doing this because this is Israel's revenge for the fact that South Africa alone launched the legal action which subsequently established that Israel was indeed committing genocide in South Africa. I'd have given him a few rejoinders that he would have been proud to have uttered, but he no longer asks for my advice. So I'm no longer a partisan of the ANC, though they will always be in my heart from the period of the freedom struggle. The Freedom Charter remains framed on my wall. I believe in it in every dot and comma. I believe in the Freedom Charter in every line. And it's the ANC's fault, as well as the fault of the geopolitical situation when they came to power at the point of liberation. There was no Soviet Union. None of the plans of the Freedom Charter could easily be achieved in the new changed international situation, but the ANC have done badly in winning real economic freedom for the majority in South Africa. But I believe in a multi-racial, multicultural Republic of South Africa. I believe in Mandela's vision in that. Most of these whites didn't arrive yesterday. The Afrikaners in particular arrived in South Africa in the 1650s. So it's not accurate to describe them as settlers, and therefore not appropriate to behave towards them or treat them as if they were settlers. You lose the rather insulting epithet, however well deserved, of settler somewhere before 400 years, which it almost is in that case. Not all whites there, of course, arrived in the 1650s, but a significant number of them did, and a significant number of the farmers did. But here's the problem. 70% of all agricultural land in South Africa is owned by white farmers. Why? Why is it that in a country overwhelmingly black African, that 70% of the agricultural land is owned by the white minority, which is not even 10% of the population of the country? That's something which has to change. Now, this was recognized by Margaret Thatcher in the case of Zimbabwe. The Lancaster House Agreement contained clauses which were never honored, that the British government would pay the Zimbabwean government monies that they could use to compensate white farmers who wanted to leave the land and who would make way for the black laborers in many cases, the smaller black farmers in many more cases, who wanted a chance to run agriculture. The British government reneged on that. Thatcher reneged on it, Major reneged on it, Blair reneged on it. And so the land reform issue in Zimbabwe, in the end, went very badly. I want to avoid that in South Africa. I don't want anybody more killed in South Africa. And far too many people are killed in South Africa. Crime and murder are at epidemic proportions in South Africa as a result of the boiling frustration of the black majority population with how little they have gained from the end of empire, end of the apartheid. Now, of course, it's not a small thing that you're now able to vote to elect your government, when before you had no vote because of the colour of your skin. It's not a small thing that you can live in District 6 in Cape Town rather than be ethnically cleansed out of it because of the curls in your hair. It's not a small thing that a black person and a white person can love, can marry, can bring up children in a way that was illegal, literally illegal before. These are great achievements. These are the achievements of the freedom struggle. But man does not live by these things alone. Man needs bread, man needs jobs, man needs business, needs an economy that functions in the interests of all, not just of the tiny elite, white or black. It's no gain for me if the guy gliding past in the Escalade is black, or if he's white. If I still don't have shoes, my belly is empty, and my children are crying at home for the basic necessities of life. Thanks, John, for that call. Comments on tonight's poll: who should face terror charges, kneecap or starmer? Anthony Wedgwood says, I just read an article claiming kneecap played a festival in London yesterday and supposedly donated all their appearance fees to an Irish charity. I can't verify if it's true, but they do seem like top lads. Well, we'll talk to Tadhg in a minute about that. They certainly donated all their fee to Médecins Sans Frontières. I don't know to which office, whether in Ireland or to the centre. They definitely did that. I can vouch for that. And of course, according to the Streisand effect, when you try to ban something or somebody, their popularity vastly increases. And I'm glad to say that's exactly what's happening with kneecap. They were playing to a crowd of thousands of ecstatic people. And 3 rather standout officers of the special branch of the Metropolitan Police, who look like everybody's granddad standing near the stage. Michael Sherry says, be fair, George. Sir Keir's problems bear all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation operation. Remember poor Hunter Biden and his laptop. Michael, that is the comment of the night. Peter Chave 5008 says the entire UK political establishment should be charged with terrorism crimes. I agree, actually, with that. And JK says, start a petition, GG. If it reaches 1 million, it has to be brought up in Parliament. The poll question would have to be asked by law. I can assure you they would not accept that petition, but thanks for the idea. Let me take a quick break. Then we've got the fantastic Irish comedian, actor and writer, Tadhg Hickey. He'll be up right after this. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labour wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding. All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, when I was in Tehran just the other week, I watched a preview of the wonderful movie made by Tadhg Hickey and my good friend and comrade Sean Murray, which linked the Irish and Palestinian struggles, and very powerful indeed it was. He's a very funny man, Tadhg, and now that he's a new father, he's maybe not getting quite so much sleep. Let's find out how it's affecting his performance. Tadhg, welcome to the show. First of all, congratulations on the new baby, wonderful news, and congratulations also on another new baby, a new series that you're going to launch, situation comedy series, I think I read it was. We'll let you talk about that later. But we're living now in a time where it's clear that support for Israel is floundering, if not dying. But the people who still support Israel are people with quite a lot of power, including the power to ban and strangle thee and me and take us off platforms and make sure we don't prosper on platforms. Layla, a good friend of ours, was taken out on Twitter today. The kit man at Arsenal Football Club, imagine, after 20 years of service, gets kicked out for saying something on his own personal Facebook in support of the Palestinians and in opposition to a literal genocide. Do you think we're winning? And when will we be in a position where it is possible freely to speak on these platforms for Palestine?
First of all, thanks so much for having me, George. And yeah, I've got 2 kids now under 2, if anybody would like to send me on any top tips in it, because I'm slowly losing my mind, but kind of in a good way, because it is beautiful as well. But yeah, no sleep for a while. Hopefully that'll come back. And today, on top of the no sleep, I woke up and I learned that I'd been taken off Instagram. Again, no warnings. Had like about 300,000 followers. Very active page, and if people know Instagram, I use the collaboration feature on it a good bit, which means I was collaborating with various Palestinian, Lebanese groups, fundraisers around the world. So I kind of use the page as part of the community, I suppose, of the resistance and pro-Palestine community. So it's a blow for, I think, a lot of people. And again, yeah, there's no recourse, there's no the appeal system is kind of famously automated, so you appeal and then kind of computer says no effectively, and then you just get permanently banned and they go on about their business. I mean, to answer your question, obviously we're being effective because, as I said in the video today, if you were so sure that you were in the right, if your political ideology was so secure, as Zionists constantly claim that they're in the right, as their supporters claim, as a leader of the Conservative Party in the so-called UK said today, you know, it's a case of right and wrong, and Starmer and others need to be on the right side of history. Well, if you're so convinced that you're right, why do you have to constantly silence and put on the periphery of things any voices of dissent whatsoever? You know, there's been targeted campaigns against, I mean, forget the likes of me. What about like Gary Lineker, Kneecap, the energy, the time, the money that's gone into silencing these voices? It just seems very peculiar to me that you would be claiming you're in the right if you had to go. I mean, if I felt I was in the right, I'd have no problem with listening to opposition voices. In fact, I'm one of those people that I wouldn't silence Zionists at all, particularly Zionist artists. You know, sometimes there's campaigns to silence Zionist artists. I'm of the belief, let representatives from both sides speak and people will make up their own mind. That's what's happened over the last year and a half, that more and more people have looked into the history of Israel and Palestine, and then they've come to their own very secure conclusions that what we're being fed by the Western media is laughably biased. So That's why they banned TikTok, because people were finding out exactly what was going on, particularly young people. And that's why kneecap are really very much in the eye of the storm right now. It's because what they represent. They represent enlightening and educating young people, telling them at festivals like Glastonbury exactly what's going on. And that's so dangerous. That's so dangerous to Western hegemony, and particularly the Zionist and US empires. I hope, George, I have to believe, or I'd lose my mind, that these people are going to see justice one day. Because obviously the Israelis are number one in the dock. Their Western backers, I think, are number two. And then I think number three is the media who have conspired to allow this genocide to go on. I actually can't believe, when I was coming on to speak to you tonight, I was like, I can't believe we're still talking about this. I cannot believe after 19 months, I can't remember the last time I was speaking to you, that we are still at the same point where we're just begging our governments to take some sort of even menial action. Like in Ireland, we're so great with words. Our political class say all the right things. In terms of meaningful actions, none. Our airports are still being used to transport US military to bring weapons to Israel to continue the genocide. We've still got a roaring trade with Israel. It's extraordinary. I can't believe it has gone on this long with no sanctions on this state. And I think we're all seeing just the level of strength that this state has had over the whole world at this point. But I do feel it's collapsing. And I think we can really point the finger at the people who are jumping on the bandwagon afterwards. For now, I would just fall in behind anybody who's calling out the atrocities right now, because we just need to get it to stop right now, you know. So personally, I will drive on. I'll use another page. Other people who haven't been banned, keep going. It's a team. We'll tag in, we'll tag out. For now, the immediate thing is just to get this absolute horror to end.
Now, going back to kneecap for a minute, Tadhg, it's not my kind of music. I had never heard of kneecap. So the Streisand effect definitely worked on me. I've now got all their records, as they say. But they are facing a terror charge. Now, the fella that's been charged, Mo Chara, he's an Irish citizen. It's not an offence to hold up that flag in Ireland, as it never used to be an offence until comparatively recently in the UK. So an artist on stage held a flag and it's subject to a terror charge. Don't you think that they're using sledgehammers to crack nuts, they're crushing butterflies on the wheels, and that will not serve them well?
Well, kneecap are very articulate, well-informed young men, and I have to say I had a tinge of envy when I saw that charge coming through, because I thought, what a beautiful opportunity for an articulate, passionate young Irishman to throw back in the face of the British establishment the ludicrousness of being charged on a terrorism charge, when the British state has carried out and continues to carry out unimaginable terrorism towards the nationalist community in the north, and is still obfuscating justice for many friends of mine in the north. So I know that young man will be very articulate if it does go to trial. I can imagine it getting thrown out, but I do think they've made, and this is a kind of a classic thing that the British state does. I think it makes martyrs out of Irish people at a bizarre rate, and turns something that mightn't have even been a story into a massive own goal for the state. I mean, like, if you go back to 1916, that's effectively what happened to the revolutionary leaders. They didn't have much support from the population at all until the British carried out the brutality that they did, and then suddenly we had a revolution. I'm not quite comparing this kneecap situation to the leaders of 16, but I do think it's an own goal to make a kind of an example out of Mo Chara for waving a Hezbollah flag. I think it happened at a gig in England, so I suppose technically Hezbollah, as you say, are recently a terrorist organisation in accordance with British law. They're not a terrorist organisation as far as I know in Ireland. And of course, as you know, they're not a terrorist organization in vast swathes of the world. That's another point, I think, that we see the world exclusively through the eyes of the British and the Americans. That's something that we really need to get out of. Because if you travel to most places in the world, they understand that groups like the Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah are defending their populations from occupation and colonial atrocities, as is enshrined in international law. So the big thing I think that we need to get out of, and I've been to Lebanon and I've spoken to people who are connected to Hezbollah. They're not monsters. A lot of them are academics. When I was in Lebanon, I visited a center for victims of Israeli atrocities, namely the pager attack, and I listened to testimony from a guy doing his PhD. There was an interior design student who left blind, left maimed. There was one guy who was telling me he was sad that he wasn't able to see his daughter anymore, but he hoped that she'd still grow up to feel proud of him, that he had persisted even after his injuries to kind of live his life and look after his family and stuff. Absolutely heartbreaking stuff that I'm sure the Israelis and the Americans would just say is collateral damage. That's Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a state within a state. It's normal human beings doing normal things. They look after their people a whole lot more than most Western governments do, that's for sure, in terms of social security, education, health. So the monstrification of Hezbollah and these other groups as big baddies and us being the goodies, you'd imagine surely has been blown out of the water in the last 19 months where we've been collectively manufacturing consent for a genocide. So I think that's a bigger thing that we need to talk about terrorism, I think, in the future. But for now, as you say, a young lad waving a flag at a concert and the British state like sending spy planes to do the bidding of a rogue state carrying out genocide, and they don't look at themselves. I mean, if they want to take it on, great, but I think it'll be in the great tradition of British justice, it'll be yet another spectacular own goal.
I honestly feel that. I mean, removing myself from it as legally I must do, being in Britain and a British citizen. If you had charged Mo with conduct likely to lead to a breach of the peace or something, you could have issued him with a caution in the post. Instead, you've set up the mother of all terror trials for nothing. And you've made the guy and his bandmates international superstars. So even viewed objectively from a political point of view, it is another enormous blunder by the British state, of which there have been many.
Also, George, as you know, you know the north of Ireland. If they want to open up a can of worms with the flags in the north of Ireland, like, that's going to be a long day. Like, you go to the north of Ireland right now, you see UVF flags flagging on lampposts. So every second lamppost in Belfast is going to be up on a terrorism charge.
Yes, that's true. But I spent. My mother was 90 yesterday, and we were together for her birthday party. Most of the people there were of Irish background, and we were talking about how her father, my maternal grandfather, every single New Year's night at the New Year's night party with a couple of Guinnesses down him, would talk about James Connolly being executed in his chair. He would just repeat that phrase over and over again. They murdered him in his chair. He couldn't even stand up. What a blunder these mass executions in Kilmainham were in 1916. So the British are famous for it. Now, anybody who knows the history of Ireland and its relationship to empire knows the answer, but a lot of people don't know. So explain to us, if you will, as you do brilliantly in the film that you've made with Sean Murray, what's so special about the special relationship between Ireland and Palestine?
Yeah, so I suppose it's the same colonial playbook, isn't it, that was visited on Ireland is now being visited on Palestine. I would have to say, and as this horror is going on, to compare the two, I think is insulting to Palestine, and I think most people would concede that in Ireland. I mean, what the Irish went through versus what the Palestinians are going through right now, it's just on a different planet, I think. And I also think, to be fair, I wouldn't be known for giving the British any credit, but just talking to friends of mine in the north recently, I think everyone agrees the scale of cruelty and depravity of the Israelis right now. Don't think we ever saw the British do that, because they didn't really have, I think they had an ideological superiority to us, but I don't know if they hated us in the way that the Israelis hate the Palestinians. I think it's on a level of, to me, it seems like psychosis. I think Zionism is a psychosis. I think people will look back on it as a kind of a mass national psychosis. But to address your question, yeah, so look, it's the same colonial playbook. I mean, the Irish identify with being, taken off their land, being murdered because the colonizer, in our case, the British, felt that we were, religiously and ethnically inferior to them. We had the same dehumanization. We were depicted as simian, uncouth, terrorists, I suppose. There used to be a Punch magazine that was popular in Britain at the time, which used to kind of manufacture consent for the colonial atrocities in Ireland by depicting us as I say, monkey-like, inferior. There was even a type of, I think it was a strenology, I think it's called. It was like a kind of a pseudoscience which tried to prove that the Irish skull was closer to the ape than it was to, say, the Anglo-Saxon skull. So they were trying to prove that we were more associated with apes and closer to Africans, who they had already kind of decreed as the lowest in the scale of humanity. So there was a kind of a pseudoscience to prove that we're just inferior across all metrics, and so we can be dehumanized and it's okay to kill us. And you see that exact same thing today. And I think one of the main things that connect us is, if you're a Palestinian and you have the temerity to stand up and fight back, again, as is enshrined in international law, then you're depicted as a terrorist and you're somehow a warmonger and all you know is violence. And the Irish had the exact same experience. So it's a really deep, I think, understanding of a fellow oppressed colonial people. Again, I think our perspective is very unique because there's not many other countries in Europe that can identify with that. And I suppose there's literal moments in terms of the solidarity then. The black and tans, who you'll know of, the most brutal of all of the British forces, literally after the War of Independence in Ireland, left Ireland and took up their station in Palestine, some of the same soldiers. So there's a kind of a literal as well as spiritual connection between the two countries. And I think that's why a lot of Irish people stand up for Palestine. But what's also happened though in the last 19 months, George, is there's a lot of Palestinians here and it's become really personal. Me and others, it would have been a kind of an abstraction in a way, something that you would read about in a book. And I've obviously seen the murals in Belfast, and Irish republicanism at its best is internationalist. We've always stood with Cuba, South Africa, Palestine, but now it's really personal because I've got my friends here in Cork and around the country who are literally waiting to see if their families have been murdered yet, and they're just waiting. And it just makes me so furious that our government here in Ireland, just like every other government in the West, is saying a lot of the right things, but is actually doing nothing. It's unconscionable. I can't think of anything like it. We're living through what feels like if you could have lived through the extermination of the indigenous American population. If that was live streamed, that's what it feels like right now. And it's like, as a people, it feels like they're slipping through our hands like sand. And it feels like there's nothing we can do, but yet we keep trying, and I will keep trying. But I just urge anybody listening who has any sway whatsoever in governments to just do something, because you're going to have to explain to your children and your grandchildren why you did nothing during the Gaza Holocaust.
Very powerfully put. Just because of the hour, I need to go to my final question. You've got this series coming up. That's new ground for you, and I'm, for one, looking forward very much to seeing it. Where is it set? How long will it last? And above all, how can people watch it?
Yeah, thanks, George. So I'm going to take a leaf out of your book, and I haven't even done my usual thing of like applying to, like, back in before the genocide, I used to have a little relationship with broadcasters. Obviously, I've done a sitcom here in Ireland, and I was speaking to people in Netflix and BBC and all that kind of stuff. All that is out the window now. They're obviously not going to take on a person like me anyway, but I'm also not even going to reach out to them. I'm just going to do things myself. So it's going to be hosted on my YouTube pages, but I already have a lot of interest from various broadcasters in West Asia to take it on. So I'll host it, and I'll allow it for any broadcaster in the world to take it on, even in Israel. Who knows? They might take it on. And it's kind of in the guise of Brass Eye and the Armando Iannucci, Chris Morris kind of satire back in the day, if people remember the brilliance of those guys. Maybe a geopolitical Brass Eye is kind of what I'm gearing towards. The first season is going to be 13 episodes. We're recording in London soon. I have already, do you know what's the only positive thing about the last 19 months is there's a real clear line of morality. So whilst I've lost a lot of work and I've lost some friends, I've gained so many wonderful friends and people in my life. And there's actually a really high caliber of actor who are already signed up to be involved in the project, and they're on the right side of history. They happen to be good actors, but they're not too weighed down by their paid partnerships. They're not spineless, in other words, and they've been saying and doing the right things over the last 19 months. So you can check it out on YouTube, but if you're in West Asia and who knows where else, you might see it on your TV screens there as well. I would imagine it'll probably be out around September, October, and in the meantime, people can keep up to date with me on Patreon, which is basically where I'm funding everything at the moment. It's my kind of sole source of income. I'm also on YouTube. Who knows, I might be back on Instagram. But wherever I am, I won't be going away, and they won't silence me, I can say that right now. So thank you, George.
Tadhg Hickey, he hasn't gone away, you know. In fact, he's back as big as ever, bigger than ever. He's going to be on your screens over a 13-week first series of what I hope will be a roaring success. Tadhg, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls right up to Gayatri's social media roundup. Stay tuned. Tommy in Glasgow is no longer in Glasgow. He's actually in the inner sanctum of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Palestine. Go on yourself, Tommy. How did a Glasgow man get there?
How did I get there? Because you're my leader for Palestine. For years, decades, 5 decades, 50 years or more, you have been championing the cause of Palestine. You know, what you forgot about Palestine, most people don't even know, you know, but you've led people like me. You know, you helped me. Anyway, yeah, I was in there today. The first prayer, the second prayer of the day, Zohar prayer, I tried to get in there. And by the grace and will of God, do you know what happened? The Zionist pig actually pushed me. He pushed me away. He said, do you want to have a go? Thinking it was a big hard man with a big gun. Is it a Glaswegian? Yeah, I want to have a go, but I said I want to go in there. I want to go into the masjid, you muppet. I never said muppet, but I said, yeah, I want to have a go. I want to go into the masjid. And he pushed me again. And alhamdulillah, he pushed me again. But anyway, sabr, as the Arabic say, patience. Have patience. There's more than one way to skin a cat. I went through another couple checkpoints. One even had the chutzpah to say to me in a funny accent, go back to the UK. Anyway, finally, alhamdulillah, with a bit of patience, sabr, persistence, I managed to get in and read my Zohar prayer, by the skin of my teeth. And what a blessed sanctuary it is. And I'm on here to try and encourage many people to come. The Christian, today I went to Bethlehem, the Church of Nativity. It was a pilgrimage on behalf of my great grandfather and grandmother, may they rest in peace. And my mother, who's quite sick, and she kept saying, I wish I could be their son. And she was, because in spirit through me, being in there, and you know, these Palestinian people in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, Al-Quds, the suffering and pain and indignity they have to face on a daily basis of how they treat these beautiful people, and they are beautiful people. So my call out tonight to you, our great leader, you know, and what the show, you have decimated the industry of news. You know, the liars, and you're a bastion for truth, and your show, alhamdulillah, all praise for God, and give you strength to carry on, all the great listeners. And I said a special dua, a special supplication for you, George, for your family, for all the listeners out there, for the Muslims. If you've not been to Masjid al-Aqsa, you need to get your finger out. It's not for Palestine, it's for the Muslim Ummah. It's for the people who are Islamic. You must go. You must go, please, for the love of God, go. Everyone go to Masjid al-Aqsa. Everyone defend the faith. Fight against the netanyahu, the Satanists that are out there. Defend the holy sanctuaries. Are you there, Christian? Are you there, Muslim? Stand with us. George, lead the way, brother. Alhamdulillah.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Unbelievably powerful clip that from the legend that is Tommy in Glasgow. Here's the legend that is Tommy in Palestine. Tommy, how's it going there?
Assalamu alaikum, George. You threw me between that there. I'm back home now. I was me possessed by something. Anything good that I say is from God, from Allah. Anything bad I say is from me. So that wasn't really me, to be honest, because anyway, I wanted to say, yeah, I was taken aback there, George, sorry. I was very emotional that night, and I'm very emotional now. I'm very emotional every day in the last 19 months when you see what's happened. And, sorry, George, I just composed myself. Sorry, yeah. So on the Wednesday, last Wednesday, when in the West Bank, when people in Jenin were being shot at, I went to a place called Al-Khalil, Hebron. And I had to see what the Palestinian people of Hebron had to go through or have to live through. 200-300, small few hundred Zionists are protected by a military junta. A city of about 500,000 people, same as Glasgow. And in the old city, and just to get in, and I was blessed to be able to go into the tomb of the patriarchs. Every Muslim who says a prayer, he says a prayer each day, 5 times a day, and everyone, and it's got a part in it to say salam to the Prophet Ibrahim, the father of all faiths. And when I was on the last time, just after I spoke to you, George, you said, you don't have to be a Muslim, a Jew, you can be anything to have feelings for Palestine. And that is 100% true. We need as many people as possible to have these feelings for Palestine, to cry for Palestine, to pray for Palestine, to go to Beit al-Muqdis, to go to Masjid al-Aqsa, to be there as a defender, just to say one prayer. If you say one prayer in Masjid al-Aqsa, you come back as a newborn. I've come back again as a newborn, and again I've left another part of my heart there, and again I asked God to take me back there, and again I asked all the people there, if you're a Muslim, please go and visit, it needs you. But the point I want to make, George, well, a couple of points, and I'll be very brief and go off and let yourself go, because you're an amazing person for what you've inspired people to do. And as I said, that clip there, yes, you 100% inspired me to get a love for Palestine and never to lose that. And for everybody out there, keep the faith for Palestine. But yeah, for my association with Palestine, the Irish Association, people, I was wearing Celtic tops and hats, and people would say, "Oh, Celtic," and God bless the Green Brigade. Just a big up to the Green Brigade as a wee aside. And the Irish people would ask me that question, indeed, just what you've asked tonight, to the brother who was on just a few minutes ago. Why has Ireland got so much love, and that's the only way to describe it, for Palestine? Well, 180 years ago, from 1842 to 1852, 5 million Irish people were starved to death in Angortnamore, the Great Hunger. The potato blight was there, the potato was poisoned, but the British administration took out animals, livestock. Well, 5 million people over 10 years died. Another 5 million people went to the ends of the earth to flee the persecution. So if people want to know why Ireland stands with Palestine, when people are being starved to death in Gaza tonight, when people are being starved by these brutal animals of a government, of a Zionist regime, and all the governments of the world to stand with them, I pray to God that I see you in hell, the gates of hell will open with the people who defend these Zionists, and these Zionists who commit these crimes against those most beautiful of people, Palestinian people. They're the most welcoming, loving people. The brother you asked me to go and see, I went to see him in the Philadelphia restaurant, and I played a clip. What a beautiful guy. And he told me the story for yourself, how you helped keep the restaurant open in the first Intifada. So, yeah, Ireland stands, and all good people stand with Palestine. You don't have to be a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian or anything. You just have to stand with it and raise your voice. I was quiet at the start. I'm raising my voice now. Everyone, raise a voice for Palestine. Do what you can. Not one small action is without waste. Say a prayer. Ask to whoever you believe in. Ask for help for Palestine. Everyone do it. And then contact your government. Contact the people. Contact the press. Double your efforts. Do more. Visit Palestine. Stand with Palestine. George, alhamdulillah. Akbir, Allah Akbar. George Galloway, our leader. Keep the fight going. Keep it lit, brother. Fight the fight. God bless Palestine.
Thank you. And God bless you, Tommy. You're not a legend for nothing. Tommy has been a legend on my show since the old radio days. He sometimes disappears for a while, but he's back firing on all cylinders now. And you should listen to what he is saying, because I think he speaks for millions. Tommy, thank you indeed for that. Now, the MOATS big donors tonight, big shout out to tonight's top donors who've been on to the MOATS.tv website since we came on air. Robert Clegg, Claire Lowe, Paul Jazz, Lynette Wells, and a huge thank you to Rafiq Kathwari, who made a very significant donation. Thank you. If you can't give a very significant donation, give a basic donation. £1, €1, $1. It's not asking for much. You can check out moats.tv. Now, Deborah is in Arizona on Palestine. Go ahead, Debs.
Hi, Mr. Galloway. I'd like to thank you and your family for all you've done to try to help these people.
Thank you.
And I am so
Thank you.
upset. I am ashamed of my government. Stop blaming our American Indians and all this. No, this is NATO. The same thing that they've been doing for the last 20 years. They did to Serbia, and what they've done to Syria, what they've done to Lebanon, what they've done to so many. And I'm telling you, my heart is with the resistance, and they were fighting for all of us to be free from the clutches of these people in this rabid dog state. And Iran, it stands up for the oppressed. And, you know, everybody acts like, I've written my congressman twice, my 2 senators twice, I've even wrote President Trump twice, and everybody likes to blame Biden for not being tough enough. No, Biden was following international laws. Biden didn't go in and electrocute those people in Lebanon. Biden hasn't just bombed Yemen just for the heck of it. And now they're going after Somalia, and they're arresting these Palestinian leaders in Syria. And there's a nice man that's out there, Free Palestine video, and he's showing how they're bulldozing St. George statue, going after the Christian stuff that's all in South Lebanon there. But you know what? We have to hang on with both hands with Jesus Christ and the 12 disciples. Look what they went through.
Amen. Amen, Deborah. Very powerful call from the state of Arizona, where I was just watching the events of the betrayal of Geronimo, the Chiriquara subset of the Apache tribe. I was just watching it last night. I recommend it to everyone. Matt Damon acts as the narrator of it. The genocide of native peoples, original peoples, by Western colonialism, Hispanic and Anglo-Saxon, and Francophone, has been the story of the last 400 years, nearer to 500 years. and it's time it came to an end. I was listening with my good wife earlier today to a short history of the scramble for Africa. The period of not even 10 years in which the entire continent of Africa was carved up like some succulent pie and then fought over, ultimately leading to the First World War by the colonial powers, the European powers at that time, but of course amply succeeded now by the United States of America, which was in turn a state founded on the genocide of the original people, the enslavement of millions of Africans, and has been ruled, I think, on an unbroken line by Anglo-Saxons ever since. These crimes are without number. These crimes are without any means of measurement. If you want to measure dead people, from Canada to the cone of South America, almost 100 million of the original inhabitants perished through being slaughtered or through being invaded and introduced to disease that they could not possibly resist, and sometimes were indeed deliberately contaminated with smallpox, for example, infected through their blankets and given out to the original Americans. The crimes are almost unmeasurable, immeasurable. They are without number. No one could count them. And it's time for change, I think, Deborah. Of course, I myself come from the West. You come from the West. We wish no harm on our neighbors. We wish no harm on our workmates, the people we worship with. We wish nobody here any harm. But the truth is, we've ruled the roost for far too long. And it's time that we were begone. For all the good that we are doing, it's time for us to go. If we are sensible, we will ask the people that we used to ruthlessly exploit and massacre, if we can come alongside them and offer our expertise, our experience, our skills, our learning, to have a win-win situation with them. But I fear our rulers are not sensible, and that they will not have the humility to do that, that they will try desperately to hang on to their hegemony. But guess what? The American Secretary of State himself, Marco Rubio himself, said yesterday, the days of American hegemony are over. This is a significant statement. It's blindingly obvious, but it's a significant fact that the Secretary of State of a Republican administration, Marco Rubio, should publicly declare it. So the first ones now will later be last. The slow ones now will later be fast. The plates are continuing to shift, and they're all shifting in one direction, namely in the direction of the people of the East and the South, whose day is coming. Deborah in Arizona, thank you so much for that call. D. Van says, George, I'm so sorry I missed your Wednesday show for the first time ever due to Spurs being in the final. Never missed a show since 2001 Top Cat days. You are the real top G. D, I'm really touched to hear that. But you can, of course, watch it on Catch Up. And 2.5 million people watched Wednesday's show, despite the fact that the great Tottenham Hotspur were playing the mighty Manchester United live at exactly the same time. So do, if you haven't watched Wednesday's show, it's a bumper. Please catch up with it. Anthony Wedgwood again says Abu Bakr Abid is now in Ireland. He's been a regular writer, contributor to EI. To see him, Electronic Intifada, to see him and Ali Abumina together in person a few days ago was so heartwarming. For the past 18 months, I feared for him. Indeed, Abu Bakr was on this very show, and we wish him every success in his new life in Ireland. Crowhawk says Ireland is only second to South Africa, Iran and Yemen in leading the moral compass of the world. And JK says, Tommy FFS, don't apologize, you are a massive legend. Indeed he is. Anthony says, your mother should be so proud of the son she raised and the person he became. It must be a good reflection of her own character. Happy 90th birthday to Mother Galloway. Thank you, Anthony. My mother watches the show religiously every week and she'll be touched by your message. Let's go to line 2 where Gina in France wants to talk Gaza. Go ahead, Gina.
Hi there, George. It's Mother's Day in France, so I'm very happy to be on the mother of all talk shows. I wanted to talk about...
Wonderful. Happy Mother's Day to everyone in France.
Thank you. So I wanted to say it's a mark of sanity to feel the need to resolve cognitive dissonance. And clearly the wanton destruction of Gaza is the kind of event that should generate cognitive dissonance in thinking people.
Yeah.
I acquired my keffiyeh in 1982 when I was 28 years old. It was red and white then, and now it is pink and white because it's faded over the decades. 1982, of course, was the year of the massacres in Lebanon, in Beirut's Saba neighborhood and the Palestinian refugee camp of Shatila. I don't know why they never had an exact figure, but it's between 1,300 and 3,500 civilians were slaughtered. To say that this was a teachable moment for me is a monumental understatement. Suddenly I had to re-examine everything I thought I knew about tiny democratic Israel. I had to ask, what is democratic about a country where millions are denied the right to vote? As an aside, it was around that time that I had a spontaneous tennis date with an Israeli guy in my neighborhood that I didn't know very well at all. I didn't even know he was Israeli. We were about to take to the court when I said something about the massacres, and he simply stormed off. It was then that the volatility of the issue became clear to me. So now I want to go back to cognitive dissonance. I wonder, don't Israelis ever experience this? Are they so propagandized that their moral compass is completely haywire? Just look at the footage of IDF soldiers filming themselves prancing around in Palestinian women's undergarments. Their glee is as unmistakable as their cravenness. Trying to get into the mind of Israeli Zionists, I cannot but think that they have long resolved their cognitive dissonance into some form of cultism. Your earlier caller, is it Tadhg?
Tadhg, yeah.
Tadhg. He called it national psychosis. Mm-hmm. But they can't all be cultists, since Israeli authorities have always worked hard to hide and deflect from and justify their crimes. They seem keenly aware of the optics, which suggests that they know right from wrong on some level. I don't know if you saw the American journalist Eric Maddox the other day, who was detained and beaten up for filming in Hebron. He said the IDF soldiers who beat him up were careful to hit him in such a way that his bruises wouldn't be visible. That's just a small example compared to another recent one when we saw an Israeli officer explaining in Hebrew, of course that meant it was to a domestic audience, that Israel was letting in a paltry amount of aid for the first time in 10 weeks because it was told that images of starving children were bad for Israel's image. And if you look at the polls, it appears that most Israelis don't have any guilt or shame at all over the massive deaths of so many Palestinians.
No, that's a fact, Gina. It's a very thoughtful call, and I have quite a bit to say in response to it, so forgive me if you feel I cut you short. 1982 was a very important year. I was in Beirut, in Hamra Street, in fact, on the balcony of a Palestinian artist, friend of mine, Zed Wehbi, a very fine artist, and who ended up actually in exile in London. And Zed and I were sat listening to Radio Monte Carlo in 1982 when we learned that the Israeli ambassador to London, Shlomo Argov, had been shot in Mayfair coming out of an event. And we immediately both knew that this event would trigger, and was perhaps intended to trigger, a massive Israeli invasion of Lebanon, which duly began within a couple of days. I escaped from Lebanon not far ahead of the invading forces, and I returned to London and my duties in the Palestine solidarity movement. And I was attending a mass rally in Hyde Park in London, the one that older people amongst you will remember when Princess Dina, the wife of Salah Tamari, read Ulysses to the crowd. We were quite a highbrow audience in those days, not that we are now, but it was a most moving occasion. And then I went to a telephone box to phone my then wife to find out how our expected baby was behaving in her tummy, to discover that she'd gone into labor and I'd better get up from London to Dundee pretty damn quickly, which I then did. My point being that Israel is still invading Lebanon today. And I was protesting that invasion on the day that my firstborn child arrived in this world. And she's now the mother of 5, and you can do the maths as to what age she is. And right now, this day, Israel is still invading Lebanon. So all of our efforts have not yet succeeded, and the crimes of Israel have continued to multiply. And then Sabra and Shatila. As it happens, this is perfect symmetry, you were not to know it. I was standing on the back of a truck outside the GPO, General Post Office, in O'Connell Street in Dublin, giving a speech about what had just happened in the invasion of Lebanon when the news arrived that the massacre of Sabra and Shatila had occurred, and I was able to refer to it. In those days, there were no mobile phones, no Twitter or anything like that. Things moved more slowly, but I was able to refer to that from the back of that truck. And that year of 1982, and those massacres, though they were not the first and certainly not the last, were formative in my mind and my life also. So I'm glad that you brought these things up. But the more fundamental point that you make is the one that has to be addressed, and it's the most uncomfortable one. The vast majority of Israelis support what Netanyahu is doing. In fact, a very substantial number of them believe that Netanyahu has not gone far enough, fast enough, deeply enough. This is a mass nationalist psychosis. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the Jewish religion. Indeed, the more religious a Jew, the less likely they are to support what the Netanyahu regime is doing. This is pure political, ideological nationalism. It is a supremacist ideology that believes, as the great spokesman, writer, philosopher, I would call him, Mr. Levy on Haaretz newspaper, said just this week that the vast majority of Israelis believe they are the chosen people. Even though they don't believe in God, most of them, they believe that God chose them, that they are ethnically superior to the Palestinian people, in the way that the British thought they were ethnically superior to the Irish, as Tadhg explained in his wonderful interview with me. So it's important to bear that in mind, because it means that getting rid of Netanyahu is not the end of the story, that nothing fundamentally will change as long as Zionism continues to receive the unending support of Western countries. We can't do much about persuading a cult out of its cultness. We can't do much about persuading a people who regard themselves as superior to stop thinking in that fascistic way, but we can stop supporting them. We can stop arming them. We can stop funding them. We can stop defending them. We can stop shilling for them, facilitating them in the international arena, from sports to culture to economic relations and so on. That we can do. We cannot persuade John Doe down on the streets of Tel Aviv out of the idea that he is God's chosen one, that his skull is thinner or bigger or whatever it is these kind of people tend to think, than the rest of us. We can't do much about that. But what we can do is stop facilitating it, stop making it possible for this ideology to continue to commit its crimes. Now, I've done more than 50 years in this cause. You sound like you've been in it for a long time too. I no longer believe that I'll see a successful conclusion to it, but I absolutely believe that if, and unless I live to the age of my mother at 90, then maybe. But if not, I'm absolutely certain that my children, most of whom are very young, will definitely live to see a free Palestine and will walk in Jerusalem without the goons of the Zionist state harassing them and threatening them at every turn. That I believe, Gina, and I hope that you see it too. Now, on the podcast, we are in the top 6 in Thailand and the UAE this week. How about that? Top 6 in Thailand and the UAE. We're in the top 20 in Russia, top 30 in Italy. And you can download the MOATS podcast by scanning that QR code on your screen right now. Please, it's very important that the podcast numbers are high and continuing to grow. The more countries we're charting in, the more countries we're being discovered in, the greater the global audience of this global university of the airwaves is going to become. I stop there only because my good wife is in the audience and she's got the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Let's start with kneecap, because obviously it was breaking last time when we were doing...
Yeah, it just came through when we were doing this on Wednesday. Yeah.
Well, imagine receiving these terror offense by postal acquisition and then still continue performing.
In London, to a packed, literally packed audience.
And they must have waved at those, as you described,
the granddads
in the back.
Pretending to groove. Do you groove to rap? I don't know. Probably not. But whatever it is you do to rap, they were pretending to do it. But people saw through them quite quickly.
No, so it's very brave and it's very fascinating how it's going to develop, because, they are getting more and more search results in the search engines, and people are interested and looking into them.
The Spotify numbers are through the roof.
They're through the roof, and therefore other people will be attracted by that as well. The tide is turning for what reason or another, but as Tide says, at this point we just have to stop the horror. And so Piers, however late, however many dead children was your quota, get on board and let's stop this horror. As Karl Morris says, when Hind Rajab was executed, I thought some condemnation was soon to come from world leaders. But atrocity after atrocity, and nothing came. And now a mother, a doctor, loses nine children.
She lost 9 children.
9 children in a targeted
Only one child
slaughter.
from the whole family survived.
So imagine being that one child.
Was left.
So there must be a reckoning, George. This poor mother, how will she find the strength? So as Tate says, this horror has to stop. And meanwhile, they're busy putting terror offenses on artists like Kneecap. So the question this week we're asking on the poll is who should face the terror charges?
Well, should I give you the voting?
Starmer?
Shall I give you the voting?
Bring it on.
Okay, who should face terror charges? Kneecap or Keir Starmer? On Telegram, 98% say Starmer. On X, 90% say Starmer. On the YouTube community poll, 96% say Starmer. And on the YouTube stream, 95% say Starmer. And that's a poll of 33,638 people. That's a hell of a poll and a hell of a result.
Keir Starmer, are you listening? Matthew White says, listening to Barnoch trying to defend Israel on the BBC this morning.
Explain who she is.
For the people outside of Britain or even within Britain.
A large number of people within Britain.
Ladies and gentlemen, the leader of the Tories.
She's the leader of the Conservative Party.
Yes, a black woman.
Leader of the opposition, a black woman, of course.
Yeah.
They always put up black women for these jobs.
So what she said was that Israel is fighting a proxy war on behalf of the UK, just like Ukraine is.
Yeah.
So,
the mask slips, yeah?
Yep. So never bite the hands that feeds you, huh, Kemi? Says Matthew. Her forefathers are turning in their graves. Sam Fa, in response to the poll, says it's a clown world when we expect music bands to uphold higher morals and ethics than the actual prime minister. And Ella Proud Refusnik says, what has he been promised to continue with the destruction of our country?
Starmer.
It's Starmer.
Starmer will not be here for much longer, take my word on that. But what comes after him will not be very much better, if better at all.
No, exactly. We'll see at the next general election. One last one from...
we'll see long before that.
Yeah, you think it's before that?
Oh, long before that. Before the end of the year, I'm saying Starmer will be gone.
Wow.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Last one.
I just wanted to close with Morns Slad. He says, now how predictable that so many pseudo-democrats in the UK would be outraged at the opinions of a rap group, yet they say nothing about Israeli genocide or actually excuse it by reference to a one-day rebellion from the largest open prison in the world where 2 million people are confined.
Beautiful, brilliantly said. It is astounding to me on many levels that such a decision should have been made. A lesser charge could have allowed them to say they were keeping up their defense, their guard, but to make it a terror offense bankrupts the meaning of the word terror. So if holding a flag, which is not illegal in your country, is on stage in the middle of a rap concert, is terror, what is real terror then? What is murdering people, shooting them in the head? What is blowing people up? What is stabbing people on a rampage with a machete? Are these two things the same? Why are you inviting ridicule upon the law? Why are you forcing the police to behave in this ridiculous way? No jury in Britain will convict Mo Farah on this charge. And for a multiplicity of reasons. First of all, he's an artist. An artist on stage does not require the state to govern what he says, what he wears, what he waves. That died with the Lord Chamberlain's role in the Harold Wilson government under Roy Jenkins' Home Secretaryship in 1966. That's when the state gave up the right to dictate what happened on stage. Secondly, as you've just alluded, Britain is arming this genocide. So holding a flag is terrorism, but selling bombs that cut children's heads off, that's not terrorism. What kind of Alice in Wonderland is this? No jury will convict Mo Farah on this. So they might actually try and reduce the charge. They might try and get it dealt with at a magistrate's level. But if this goes to the Crown Court, as any terrorism charge surely has to, there'll have to be a jury. And that jury will be 12 good men and true, a jury of our peers, and I consider it inconceivable that they could sustain a charge of terrorism against a rap artist holding, briefly, a flag at a concert in London. But if they persist, they'll be humiliated, and Kneecap will go on and on, as Celine Dion, more my kind of music, would say, on and upwards, as is the mother of all talk shows, I'm glad to say. We've got time for one last call. It's from Sarah in Minnesota. Sarah, you're the last call. What would you like to say?
Well, if I could say anything, it's I didn't know that our country was bombing Israel, and Israel was bombing itself until like 4 days ago, and no one believes me. And I kind of felt like maybe kind of leaving the country soon. You know, there's a girl who doesn't really have anyone but her dog, and, you know, doesn't want to be here, you know, when... What is it? Any advice? I'm sorry for this country.
I've been in Minnesota in the winter, and it can be grim. So if I were you, I'd move somewhere warmer in the United States, but I hope you don't leave the United States. It's a great country, from sea to shining sea, from coast to coast. It is a land of plenty, and God has given your country so much, and it could be so much better. It's better if you stay in the United States of America and join the fight to make America great. I don't say make America great again. That would identify me with a trend with which I'm not identified. But there's nothing wrong with wanting to make America great. And I have many friends in the United States who are trying to do just that. And if the good people leave the United States, it will leave the less good and even the bad a free rein. So I hope you don't leave, but if you're going to leave anywhere, I would leave to, I don't know, California. Carlsbad is a very nice town. If I ever moved to the United States, I'd like to live in Carlsbad on the way down towards San Diego. Thank you, Sarah. Sorry it was a bad line, but it was a good call, and it closes the show some 10 minutes late. So forgive me for that. Gayatri and I thank you very much for joining us and hope that you'll be with us again on Wednesday. If we can make this show another 2.5 million show, we will be able to announce next Wednesday that we've had our very first 5 million show. Wouldn't that be something? So watch it and get other people to watch it too. It's been marvelous. Thanks for joining us.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.